Well, howdy, Scooper Troopers, Inside Scoopers, SkatCats, and Littermates, and whatever else you call yourselves. I'm Mr. Scriptkeeper.
And I'm Mrs. Scriptkeeper.
And this is the 5th episode of the Dipshit Files. And today we've got a actual monster.
Yeah.
But he called himself the man of the century. But what was he really like?
Well, Pedro Alanzo Lopez is a convicted Colombian serial killer who's believed to have murdered more than 300 people.
Yikes.
He became known as the Monster of the Andes in 1980 when he led police to 53 graves in Ecuador. The victims were all girls between the ages of 9 and 12, and in 1983 he was found guilty of the murders of 110 girls in Ecuador. Yet he further confessed to an additional 240 murders in Peru and Colombia, but we'll go over that.
He's one of the biggest piece of shits in the history of the world.
Yeah, simply because of, his victimology, 9 to 12 years old, young girls.
Couldn't be more of a threat to society.
Fucking terrible.
Couldn't be a bigger threat to society.
Yeah.
Does he rank up there with Albert Fish? We're going to find out. We added some interesting things this week on our dipshit meter. So join us as we open up another dipshit file with this week's dipshit, Pedro Alanzo Lopez.
Dipshit Files.
All right, so welcome to the show. We've got a fucking dark-ass one today.
Yeah, we do.
Like one of the worst ones ever. So Pedro Alanzo Lopez, his life is crap. What I find interesting about the story is that a missionary intervenes in the middle of his life, or even kind of earlier in his life, and he could have, if he didn't do what he was doing, what he thought was right,
He could have saved hundreds of lives.
Yeah, hundreds of lives.
Yeah.
And so it's like, goddamn, sometimes good intentions really do have unintended consequences that are through the roof. Through the roof. And this is also a story of kicking the rock down from one country to another. I can't believe what happens to this guy's life. And there's an even worse part that we'll get to as we get to it that I cannot believe, and you won't be able to believe it either. The fact that this guy isn't a household name is mind-blowing as well. He's the real, true-to-life boogeyman.
Yeah, his story is very interesting, very dark, and I had a hell of a time doing research on this because I had to delve into some pretty ugly stuff. And so I didn't go into detail on a lot of what he did and how he did it. And I am intentionally just giving you the basics. I mean, I really don't think any of us want to hear about...
No, it's horrific. This one's...
what this person does to young
children,
girls.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave a lot to the imagination. Hopefully you guys don't have to imagine much.
Right.
But I am going to cover it, so...
It's high-level psycho.
Yeah, fucking insane. So are we ready for the story?
I think so. What we're going to do today is tell the whole story. We've got a little bit of context to start with. And then we're going to go through his early life and into the terrible shit that he did. And, of course, we'll end up getting to the dipshit meter. And he's high, that's for sure. But does he challenge Albert Fish all the way?
Oh, we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. And also we added a new area to the dipshit meter that we think makes it even better.
Yeah. And
more true to what kind of danger to society these people are.
Yeah.
And I think you guys will agree, and we redid every single one of the people we've already done.
We're going to have to go through that.
We gave them new scores, and so we'll go through that too. But it's real quick and real easy. And then we'll preview next week, and then we'll say bye. But for right now, let's start with this terrible dipshit.
Dipshit Files number 5, Pedro Lopez.
This is the story of one of the most brutal and ruthless killers that ever lived. A story with disturbing implications, although the perpetrator of the crimes has been identified and convicted. To date, his whereabouts are completely unknown.
That's the scariest part.
Right?
That's the dumbest shit that's allowed. That's not allowed.
But let's...
Hundreds of little girls, and he's like, I'm just going to go free.
I'm just going to go again.
Not life for that guy.
Jesus.
Not the death penalty for that guy.
Well, let's go step by step with this, though.
Okay, step by step.
So Pedro Alanzo Lopez was born in Tolima, Colombia on October 8th, 1948, and he's the 7th of 13 children in the family.
Oh, we solved it already. All middle children are serial killers. Go ahead.
Lopez's mother's name was Benilda Lopez de Castaneda. Okay, I'm going to take a moment here.
Okay.
I don't speak Spanish.
Right.
I don't know how to read Spanish.
Our son does.
He does, and he's fantastic. He's fluent. And if he were to listen to this, which he will,
he's going to make fun of us bad.
He's going to make fun of me.
Yeah, you.
But listeners, bear with me. I'm going to completely butcher these words.
She's going to do her best.
But I'm going to do my best. I'm just letting you know. Don't turn it into a drinking game because this is set in Colombia. Y'all will die with how many times I screw up these words. But I'm going to do my best. So his father, Medardo Reyes, was a member of the country's right-wing party who was killed in a conflict called La Violencia.
The violence.
Yes, the violence. The armed conflict of the area that would have repercussions for years to come. Lopez's mother, Benilda, was 3 months pregnant with her son at the time of his father's death. In researching this case, his child...
Tragedy before he was even born.
Right.
And he felt it, kind
he
of thing.
was born into it. So in researching this case, his childhood resembles a nightmare. He was born into a country in the midst of urban riots and living conditions are extremely poor. La Violencia is a 10-year civil war in Colombia from 1948 to 1958 between the Colombian Conservative Party and the Colombian Liberal Party and was fought mainly in the countryside.
Yeah, real quick, those words don't mean the same things.
Yeah.
In the same places for the same people.
Right.
I'm sure you guys know that. But I don't need to know
it means something different there than they do here, but
that's not for this show to discuss.
I need to throw that in there so there is a differentiation between the two sides. So I'm going to go in a little bit of history to kind of get an idea of La Violencia.
Let's do it.
Context to understand the dipshit.
So La Violencia is considered to have begun with the April 9th, 1948 assassination of Jorge Eliezer Gaetan, a Liberal Party presidential candidate for the 1949 November election. His murder provoked the Bogotazo rioting, which lasted 10 hours. It was only 10 hours long, but 5,000 people were killed.
Fuck.
Rural town police and political leaders encouraged conservative supporting residents to seize the agricultural lands of liberal supporting residents, which provoked resident-to-resident violence throughout all of Colombia.
Yeah, when you use the government to take your political enemies' property away, people don't like that.
La Violencia is estimated to have cost the lives of at least 200,000 people, almost 2% of the population of the country at the time.
Wow.
Due to incomplete or just non-existent statistics, the exact measurement of La Violencia's humanitarian consequences is impossible to know.
No.
So scholars, however, estimate that between 200,000 and 300,000 lives were lost. 600,000 and 800,000 were injured. And almost 1 million people were displaced.
Of course.
So in La Violencia's directly or indirectly affected 20% of the whole population.
Which means it affected the entire country.
Yep.
And the whole country was thrown into absolute chaos. Yeah.
But La Violencia did not acquire its name simply because of the number of people it affected.
To name something the violence forever, I imagine it's pretty violent.
It was the manner in which most of the killings, maimings, and dismemberings were done. Yeah,
fuck.
Dismemberings.
Well,
now remember, this boy is growing up. He's born into this. Just for context, this is what he's seeing. Certain death and torture techniques become so commonplace that they were given names. For example, Picar para Tamal, which involves slowly cutting up a living person's body, or Boca Chiquar, where hundreds of small punctures were made until the victim slowly bled to death.
See, I feel like that's taking yourself and your ideas a little too serious.
Yikes!
I think that's going a little too far with whatever you think you believe. Might want to read a different book.
Might want to sit down and have a cup of coffee and chill out for just a second. Yeah. Due to the nature of war, Pedro would most likely have been witness to horrific atrocities at an extremely young age.
Yeah.
When you mix the lack of food and basic necessities, the daily terror of invasion, and the horrific sights, sounds, and smells of the atrocities being committed around him, Pedro's childhood would have been the stuff of nightmares.
Big time.
Seriously. Nonetheless, Pedro was described as a polite boy and wanted to be a teacher, according to his mother.
Wow.
He often helped the younger neighborhood children with their schoolwork.
That's irony. That's got to be irony.
So
Damn you, Alanis Morissette. I can't remember what irony is anymore.
In 1957, at the age of 8, the first signs of something growing in the child's psyche began to appear. His mother caught him trying to force his younger sister into sexual intercourse. For this reason, he's thrown out of the house and he's forbidden to return. So they kicked him out.
Okay.
Pedro's forced...
So that's the first kick down the road.
Yep.
All right, society,
8 years
your
old.
problem. 8-year-old maniac, your problem. So
trying to rape his sister.
That's the first time he's kicked down the road to be somebody else's problem.
So Pedro's forced to adapt to street life until he's approached by a man who promises to give him a house and food. So he accepts, making a choice he will regret for the rest of his life. Because the man does not take him to his home, but leads him to an uninhabited building where he sexually assaults him before abandoning him on the street again. After this terrible event...
So now I feel bad for a psycho. Thanks a lot, weird universe that I live in.
In the process of talking about these serial killers, all of the stories have a psychological background.
Right. Well, it humanizes this piece of shit that...
Well, we're trying to understand, at least from my perspective, when I'm looking into this stuff, I'm trying to understand. I can never understand.
Right.
I just don't get it. But I'm trying to put the building blocks in place to find out how they got to this point. Mm-hmm. How did you get here?
Right.
I mean, who hurt you?
Well,
and
this is at least step 1. This is step 10 probably.
There's very few that don't have that answer.
Right.
Very few.
For a lot of these serial killers, it seems like the world is hell, and so they create a little hell that they can control.
Well, after this terrible event, he develops a strong distrust of strangers. So he alienates himself more and more from the outside world. He begins to move only at night. He becomes nocturnal, looking for food in garbage cans and even in the landfills. So,
damn it.
After a few months of life alone on the streets, he decides to move to Bogota, the capital city of Colombia, where he became one of the homeless children known as Gamines. I probably said that word wrong, but he eventually joined a gang and smoked bazuco, an impure form of cocaine. So he was, 9 when he started smoking cocaine?
In a gang.
Yeah.
Right. After already being put in very adult situations and already putting another child in a very adult situation, at least
4, 5, 6 years old, seeing somebody bleeding to death slowly in the street due to, any of this crazy shit, slowly cutting up a living person's body. So anyways, so it's here that he, while he was begging in the street, he's approached by a couple who offered to host him in their home. So it was this young couple. They see this child on the streets and they want to help him. Mm-hmm. So they take care of Pedro, guaranteeing him a home and even enrolling him in school for orphans. So he was able to go back to school.
Right. So this isn't kicking the rock down the road. This is somebody picking up the rock and saying, all right,
let's do something with this.
Polish off this rock a little bit.
So things seem to be improving, until the age of 12.
Oh, fuck. The rock bit me.
Yeah. Lopez is harassed by his teacher. And after this occurrence, he decides to leave everything behind and go back to living on the streets. Mm-hmm. It's at this time Pedro begins stealing cars to make a living, becoming an expert thief. He continues this shady business until in 1969 he's arrested during a theft attempt and sentenced to 7 years in prison. He was only 21 years old.
Sheesh.
Yeah, so after only 2 days in jail, he claims to have been sexually assaulted by 4 inmates. From this moment, 4 people. So from this moment on, he determines that he'll no longer tolerate any form of abuse. He armed himself with a handmade knife.
Yeah, what he decided was, I'm going to be the one that does all the abuse from now on.
Yep,
yeah.
So he made a knife, and then he kills the 4 inmates who raped him one by one.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, for this, he's granted 2 additional years in prison with the mitigation for self-defense. So he gets 2 more years. He finishes his sentence in 1978, and Pedro is now 30 years old, and the return to freedom marks the beginning of a new era for Lopez, but in the most negative sense possible.
Yeah. This guy shouldn't have been let out.
Yep. Madness has now definitively settled in his mind and starts to give rise to a series of atrocities. He settles in Peru, where he begins to target young women of the Indian tribes. According to his statements, he's killed more than 100 of these women. During one of his attempts to assault a little girl, he's captured by a tribe of Ayachucos who tortured him for several hours before deciding to bury him alive.
Okay, so
Yikes.
He hates the planet.
Yikes.
Because it's mean to him. And his response is to be mean to the planet.
Right.
So this is just chaos and just trapped in like this little evil cycle.
Yep, you hurt me, I'll hurt you right back.
Yeah,
right?
and it's so deep into the hurt at this point. That God knows what it was like in the moment. Fuck.
Well, evidently luck was on Lopez's side, because this is the missionary guy that you were talking about.
Well, that's karma for you right there.
A missionary manages to convince the community to spare Lopez's life and entrust and basically give him to the authorities. He's handed over to the police. Eventually, he's removed from the country and transferred to Ecuador.
Kicking the rock once again.
Yep. They're like, I don't want to deal with them. So,
out of here.
You're off to Ecuador.
But imagine what that was like.
You killed 100 people. Okay, well.
But imagine that's got to be like some of these guys that are prison guards are like, yeah, this is just a job. I don't want to be around this. You guys want to be around this guy? Let's get him out of the country. We could just give him to Ecuador. Fuck those guys. Ugh. Fuck Ecuador.
Yeah. Well, during this period, he claimed he'd killed about 3 girls a week.
Dude.
3 children a week. His words were, in an interview, I like the girls in Ecuador. They're more gentle and trusting, more innocent.
Goddamn. I wish that missionary would have been like,
right.
Go ahead.
Let him bury him alive.
Yeah, let's just, as you were. There you go.
So
it's God's will. Seems to be.
In the following years, he moves more around the country, also making visits back to Colombia, continuing his crazy serial killer career. He manages to go unnoticed as the disappearance of young girls are attributed to reasons of sexual slavery.
Right.
So people are thinking that they're being abducted by the slave trade.
So now there's this kind of monster they don't even know to worry about.
The sex trading was going on.
Right. So he was at least competing with it.
Yeah. One man was competing with sex slaves, sex traders.
So people were afraid of losing their children, especially their daughters, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But they didn't know it was him. He was just... That's so crazy.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to his arrest. What actually brought him into police custody officially?
Capturing the Dipshit.
Ambato, Ecuador, April 1980. Carvina Poveda is the mother shopping at a local market with her 12-year-old daughter, Marie.
Normal stuff.
Everything seems normal until a scruffy-looking man approaches and grabs her daughter, running away. Carvina starts screaming, and in a few moments, the subject is blocked by the merchants, who in the meantime have called the police. When the agents arrive on the scene, they take the man into custody and transport him to the police station. Pedro Lopez, this is the name the attacker just gave the police.
That's a boogeyman's name.
However, Pedro doesn't want to talk to the investigators, so they have to develop a ruse to get him talking. So they send a priest from the area, Father Cordoba Godino, under the false pretense that he's a prisoner, and put him in a cell with Lopez.
No thanks.
After a short time in the cell, though,
no thanks,
Pedro begins to share terrible things with the father.
No thanks.
So much so that after a day, the priest asked to be taken out of the cell and moved away from Pedro.
And he leaves the country. He's like, no, I'm out of here.
So he reports everything to the police, who subsequently decide to question Pedro again. So, yeah, they want to know more.
Yeah, I bet.
This time Pedro will speak, leaving everyone speechless. There was no longer any doubt the policeman had just stopped a monster. Mm-hmm. Now is where this terrible story gets even worse.
The Dipshit confesses.
So he confesses to being a serial killer and killing 110 girls in Ecuador, 100 girls in Colombia, and 100 more in Peru.
Jesus.
The Associated Press...
Three-country tour of fucking...
Right. The Associated Press reported he was arrested in March 1980, and then he confessed to killing 103 girls, including 53 whose bodies had been found. He acted by prowling in search of victims, mainly in the middle of markets. He often followed these children for a few days, waiting for the right moment to kidnap them. Yeah. And as soon as he managed to get a hold of them, he would drag them to an isolated area where he sexually assaulted them and strangled them with his bare hands, looking them straight in the eye.
So he is the ultimate, as a father of a daughter, or 2 children, doesn't matter, boy or girl, he is the ultimate fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Because the most things that people are fear about are kidnappings, and it ends up being 95% people that know the child, family members or friends of family. This is just some random dude that preys on 3 girls a week, and this is the ultimate nightmare.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And this one paragraph, there's 3 sentences here, condenses a lot of information that I skipped over. Now I want to just clarify a little bit here. He kidnapped them. He drugged them to an isolated location where he sexually assaulted them, not once, but a lot. And then he strangled them, but not once, but a lot.
Right. He waited for them to almost die, and
not all of them. I guess it depended on his mood that day.
Or how strong the child was. I mean,
right.
Goddamn, dude.
So there was a bit of torture going on here.
Right.
And it wasn't just, rape and kill. It was over and over again.
There's almost no solution there either. When you have this kind of scenario going on in a society, when you have little girls that are being picked off and people don't know. I mean, what's the solution? Teaching 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old girls how to use fucking firearms? I mean, there's almost nothing you can do other than... I mean, just that's the scariest scenario I can think of as a parent.
Chilling, to say the least.
Yeah, it's almost just like dropping bombs on a city. Yeah. But it's just this little fucking assassin, fear bombs.
The agents decided to cross-check his statements, so they asked him to be taken to the places where he'd buried his victims.
Okay.
And
he did, right?
And he did. So he took them to a secluded area near Ambato, where there were the remains of 53 girls between the ages of 8 and 12. 53 skeletons.
Dude. Being
in police custody was likely the safest place for Pedro, though.
Did you see any of this is like a mass grave?
It was yes, I did. I saw photos. So they were all black and white, the ones that I saw. And what had happened, there was, and I'll cover it in here a little bit later, but there was a storm that had come through and there was a flash flood. And it had revealed bones in this area. So what I saw was muddy. There was, he left the clothes on the children. So in this mass grave, there were clothing in, bones wrapped in clothes.
Their kids.
Exactly. And there's so many unidentified bodies that they were children, but they couldn't claim them. So only 53 were found and identified.
Oh, so there was even more.
Because of their clothing.
Jesus.
Yeah, so it's not like
So how did he do this? I wonder. Did he just dig a hole and bury them one at a time and redig the hole, or was he burying them in little shallow graves?
It looked like
this rainstorm made it into a big mud mess of bones.
It looks like what it looked like from the photos. It looked like he had a killing field. So he had kind of like a garden where he would put these people, is what it looked like to me. It appeared that way, although what I was looking at was the side of a hillside. So I don't know if the storm had come through and created a gully because of the flash flood, quite possible. Or was he burying them on a hillside and it just washed that topsoil away?
Imagine what's going on inside his mind. When he's doing all this shit. Imagine the kind of inner dialogue that he's having, and how you justify this or
there is
revel in it.
I don't go over it in my script that I wrote, but I mean, at one point during the police questioning him on site of the killing field that he buried these bodies at, he was so heartless and spoke about this stuff so matter of fact. It was almost like he was, talking about what he ate for breakfast that morning.
Yikes.
At one point, there was a photographer there, like a forensics photographer, taking pictures of the scene, and he actually picked up a skull, tucked it under his arm like a basketball.
Fuck.
And went to pose for the photographer.
It's like, is this from my baseball card, my basketball card?
Right.
My murder guy card?
The police are like, no, put that down. And absolutely do not take a picture of that.
Right.
And that was in an interview that included Pedro and another gentleman. So,
Fuck.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when there's so much information that I didn't put in here. But
there's deep dives out there. You guys can find
absolutely.
But this is this story continues. There's more fucking shit.
Yeah. So basically, the police, they asked him to show him the location, and they were afraid that because the public found out what was going on, they were afraid that Pedro was going to be killed.
Well, they caught the boogeyman.
So in order to transport him safely to this dump site,
they were kind of afraid. They're like, they want to know where all the bodies are.
No, they don't want him killed because they want information.
But they all want him to die bad. I mean, every one of them.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Most of them want to do it with their own bare hands, which is another great thing about humanity. Hooray for us.
Well, in order to transport him safely to the dump site, the police disguised him as a police officer. They had to dress him up like a cop in order to get him out there and feel safe so people won't kill him.
It's a crazy world.
Well, the police believed he only confessed because of that flash flood, and the flash flood had uncovered the mass grave containing many of his victims in that area. So they think that, he's like, well, I got caught type thing.
Right.
So on July 31st, 1981, 33-year-old Lopez pled guilty to the murders of 57 girls and had confessed to 300 more sexual assaults and stranglings.
Fuck.
He's imprisoned in Amparo, where he was officially diagnosed as a sociopath. You think?
This is
You think?
I'm going to go psychopath. I'm going to go full on psychopath.
So this is crazy though. We're going to get into some really fucking crazy shit. So because of Ecuador's laws at the time, Lopez only received the maximum sentence, which was only 16 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The public was outraged by this. So Ecuador later changed its maximum prison sentence to 25 years. So that's better than 16.
See, that's people that believe in that you can rehabilitate the mass murder motherfucker.
Yeah,
I disagree with you guys. Sorry.
Despite the scope of his crimes, he only served 14 years before being deported to Colombia.
Kicking the rock down the road.
According to CNN, Lopez was arrested in 1980, but was freed by the government of Ecuador at the end of 1998.
And they also kicked the rock down the road.
Yep.
They're like, we don't want him. We don't need no boogeyman around now.
Yeah, in an interview from his prison cell, Lopez described himself as the man of the century, as he said he was being released for good behavior.
See, when I heard that, I wondered if he was talking about, like, because I was so good when I didn't kill these people that I probably should have killed. I should have killed at least 5 or 6 of these fucks in prisons, but I didn't.
Yeah, I don't.
Or is
who
it
knows?
like, because I killed all these people, I'm the fucking best human because I'm, Mr.
Who knows
Predator
what goes through these people's minds? I listen to interviews and I'm like, what the fuck? You said that out loud.
Yeah. It's insane. Well, there's 2 scenarios as what he may have thought.
So an A&E biography documentary reported that he was released from an Ecuadorian prison on August 31st, 1994, and then rearrested as an illegal immigrant and handed over to Colombian authorities, who charged him with a 20-year-old murder. Okay, so he's charged. Now he's released. He's been handed over as an illegal immigrant. He's declared insane.
Yeah.
And held in the psychiatric wing of a Bogota hospital.
Wood chipper wing.
But just 4 years later, in 1998, he was declared sane.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was released
All better.
Yep, he's all better, and he was released on $50 bail.
$50 and you can go, Mr. Mass Murder Guy.
Well, there's a difference in currency exchange.
$50 bail. Okay, yeah. Subject to certain conditions, right?
For hundreds of lives, that is definitely not the going rate of hundreds of lives.
It says subject to certain conditions. I'm sure it means, stay in the
area.
You can't have a firearm. Stay away from children. He fucking fled. He left.
Of course, he just went into the world.
But he went directly. He visited his elderly mother, who said he was there to ask for his inheritance. But upon finding out that she didn't
have anything,
poor,
right.
Yeah.
He was a sweetie pie.
He sold her only bed.
Oh, no.
And her only chair to the people on the street.
Well, that's pretty on brand. Probably ripped those people off, too. He probably stole the rest of their money. Here's a bed, motherfucker. Give me your money.
Lopez then vanished with concerns having risen about his possible connection to a 2002 murder.
1 out of almost 400?
Interpol released the advisory for his rearrest by Colombian authorities over that murder in 2002. He is currently wanted by the police, and his whereabouts are unknown as of 2022. No one knows where the fuck he is.
That's fucked. And he's in his 70s.
Yeah.
So he's fucking just run around the world.
Since 1994, since the year our daughter was born, he's been rolling around the world. There is no rehabilitation for somebody like this.
No. Well, after the first couple murders, you don't try.
300.
Yeah. There's no like, well, he did kill 300, but he did fill in your whatever religious person.
Yeah, he found some deity.
Yeah, he 12-stepped his way out of murder,
God.
Rape and murder, and now he's better.
Okay,
real quick though.
Yeah.
This reminds me of there's lots of different versions of what people believe when it comes to ghosts and afterlife and what things will haunt other people and why. Okay. This guy's running around the world. If any of the ones where it's like the killer is haunted by the killed.
300 attached ghosts.
Yeah, so then go a little further. Say you have a character that's, that can see through the veil. and sees, realm stuff, imagine how busy this guy would be. They'd spot him out and be like, shit, he's got 500 fucking little spirits chasing around going, you motherfucking kill me. And I hope he does. And I hope it sucked every day for him.
I hope it sucked the life out of him.
Sociopath, psychopathic behavior at this level, I don't think. He probably reveled in it.
Okay, so here's a little bit of coverage. So the 2006, I found this is interesting. The 2006 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records credited Lopez as being the most prolific serial killer.
Ooh.
The Book of World Records. Okay, so the listing was removed after
people
complaints.
were pissed.
They complained that it made a competition out of murder.
I am not a person to be offended by things, and that doesn't offend me, but it's fucking dumb. That's very
It's
uncouthful.
insensitive.
Yes. But they figured it out. I'm sure they've done that many times. And they're like, calm down, you fucking bastards. We're trying to figure this out. You guys said you wanted serial killer shit, and we're fucking trying to go at the 21st century. Fuck you.
So,
sorry.
Last
Worst
week,
Irish/Scottish accent ever. My bad.
Well, a couple of weeks ago,
Guinness is Irish. In case people don't know, I'm just educating you guys. It's just for those of you that don't know, in case you didn't know.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we covered Eileen Wuornos and Amy Dugan.
Right.
I had stated that I wasn't sure what constituted a serial killer. What was the definition of? Because if they weren't considered, Eileen Wuornos was considered a serial killer, but
not
Amy wasn't. So
right.
I was confused. So I found a couple of detailed stuff here. So according to the National Center for Victims of Crime, mass murderers differ from serial murderers or serial killers in that mass murderers appear to suddenly act out and indiscriminately kill numbers of people in a specific time period.
Yeah, like a school shooter or
right.
terrorist.
So the official FBI definition for serial homicide is, or a serial killer is, 3 or more separate events with an emotional cooling off period between homicides, each murder taking place at a different location.
Really?
So that's the FBI's definition of
that makes sense.
Serial homicide.
The different location thing, I guess that makes sense too.
Right.
So it would be a different location. Unless you're just picking people off from the same place, which in a sense, little town is.
Well, he was. Three girls a week at least.
And then dumping them in the same place. So it's not necessarily...
Yeah. Well,
I guess that's why that seems a little
I find it interesting that he did this in Ambato, even after... Because he went to Peru, he went to Ecuador. He was all over the place.
Right.
And he said that he did all of this stuff.
The Monster of Andes tour. Sorry.
Jesus.
I know.
But Ambato is where he basically was raised. So it was very interesting.
So he came back home to...
Yeah, and dumped all these carcasses. Okay, so... While looking into this case, I was reminded of another case. So Henry Lee Lucas confessed to the murder of an unknown girl known as Orange Socks. And she was called that because she was wearing orange socks when she was found in 1979. Lucas had confessed to the murder seemingly just for fun, as he had confessed to thousands of other murders basically to inflate his body count. So while the Lopez body count really is high, it seems some serial killers, or the serial killers in general, don't mind exaggerating their number of kills to match something like this.
It's insane what we're competitive about as far as human beings.
I know.
I mean, there's some people that they're like, I want to be the fastest in this, and I'm going to train real hard. And other
right.
people are like, I want to be the sloppiest, shittiest fuckhead ever lived. I'm going to do it too.
Well, so as another example, Russian serial killer Alexander Pichishkin, also known as the chessboard killer. I know you're familiar with who that is. Yeah. He said he planned to kill 64 people, which just...
With the chessboard.
Yeah, matched the number of squares on a chessboard. Of course, he later admitted he would have kept killing even after reaching that special number. It's been suggested that Pichishkin was in competition with Andrei Chikatilo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, real quick.
The Rostov Ripper.
Fill in your own. What is big deal? All right, hold on. Let's hear it. No, let's give him space. Go ahead. This is your turn. Yep. On the count of 3, I want you to say, what is big deal in your best voice.
Yes.
Not you, wife. Oh. This is for the listeners.
All right.
1, 2, 3. All right, now back to the story.
Now it's out of your system.
What is a big deal with the big deal?
Either way, he was a danger to himself or others, which is the main point of any of these serial killers. Obviously, Pedro Alanzo Lopez wasn't just dangerous due to the sheer number of victims. In fact, if he had been caught or killed sooner, he wouldn't have had such high numbers anyways. Right. So
if that missionary hadn't intervened, it could have saved a couple hundred.
But still, because his whereabouts are unknown, the body count may have become higher after his release.
fuck. I mean, he's probably out there still killing. You don't just turn it off.
Right.
And it's just strangling children. That's probably one of the easiest ways. They're the easiest people to kill.
Well, so...
Oh, damn it. Dear Jesus. Seriously?
When I was giving this some thought.
Right.
So I started to think that if he is still out there, he's forced into hiding and has a much harder time getting away with murder. And, of course, any other antisocial bullshit. So, after all, if you're on the run, you have to be careful of the company you keep. Right. So, I mean, who you talk to. In fact, I have a hard time...
Who would want to help this fucking asshole?
Well, I have a hard time imagining him successfully traveling far undetected. Yeah. Maybe possible, but it hardly seems like it would be easy for him to do. Like, just... travel to another continent. In addition, the culture shock of entering to like a foreign area, foreign land, it's reasonable to think that he'd stand out and he can't keep a low profile. So
also that like psychic lady that sees all the fucking spirits shouting at him. He's like, it's like flags, like 500 flags just on this guy of fucking ethereal ghost chitrons. I don't know.
Well, what kind of, I mean, if you're a fugitive, what kind of difficulties would you be facing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you can't get a job very easy.
Right.
I mean, you're destined to have to get jobs that are in the black market.
Right.
Or to just steal.
Well, you could get locked up. You could get attacked by other
Getting
criminals.
locked up would be the best thing, but you'd want to find, like, in where they're talking about, at the time period they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's not... You got to go find a prison that's not going to do terrible things to you there.
Right.
You know? So there's really no way.
Well, you can't get a job. You can't make any money. You're going to have a hard time with it.
You're fucked.
You can't connect with any of your older friends or your family.
No.
Because it will get you found.
Right.
So a lot of these people they're like chameleons. They're able to blend. Mm-hmm. But they tend to make missteps somewhere along the line. So they kind of fuck up here and there. In fact, when Lopez was originally caught, remember when he was caught at the market? Mm-hmm. It was by a crowd of angry people. So he was accused of trying to lure a little girl away from her mom. Yeah. And it turned out the angry crowd was right to suspect him. But I want to bring up, too, I can appreciate that because similarly, serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was apprehended by an angry mob. So I don't know if you remember that, but they've recognized him. They detained him as a crowd, beat the fuck out of him until the police got there.
Good.
So, when you think people were just fed up with the Night Stalker bullshit. Right. So when you think back to the photos of, there's a photo of Richard Ramirez and he's got a bloody nose and a cut face.
That's from...
The crowd did that to him.
Did they beat the shit? We don't know if they beat the shit out of him.
It doesn't say anywhere whether he got the shit beat out of him or not. I hope they did.
I bet they weren't gentle with him.
Yeah,
they weren't just detaining him like, hold on.
Well, he tried to kidnap a little girl. They don't know who he is. They don't know what he's done, but they do know he tried to kidnap a little girl. So hopefully he got punched.
Oh, he got punched a lot.
Yeah, I hope so.
If it's a crowd of people, they were taking turns punching.
It was merchants. Sure. It was in a market. It was people who had stands and stuff.
Who probably know that family.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, fuck. But he's still out there. That's the worst.
That bothers me. And the fucking fact that he was released, he was declared insane 24 months later. He went from insane in 24 months to, he's fine.
He's fine.
He's fine.
What happened? We switched doctors, and we didn't keep good records.
Good God.
We didn't keep track of the 300 murders that are in his file. Whoopsie, that's a file we should keep. Did you ever figure out? It's hard to find these kind of things. Was there any estimate about his IQ or?
Nope. I looked.
It's tough.
Yeah. He was known when he was younger because he did help the neighborhood kids with their homework.
Oh, goody.
He was kind of known to be on the more intelligent side as far as schooling goes. There was no grades. There was no mention of any of that stuff. There may have been, but a lot of it was in Spanish.
Right.
So I had a hard time reading some of the articles. He didn't seem to be real cunning when it came to where he put the bodies. I mean, he put all of his eggs in one basket, in a sense, in one town anyways. Who knows how many of those sites he has.
Right.
Because he has to have one in Peru with the indigenous women, the tribal women.
That's right.
He killed over 100, evidently. So their bodies have to be somewhere, unless he was just nomadically living and traveling through Peru and killing as he went, which is possible.
Totally. Well, let's get more into all of these details on the other side of this. Let's do the dipshit meter.
How big of a dipshit is this guy? Pretty big.
All right. As you guys know, with the dipshit meter, we have 4 categories normally, but we've added one to make this just more precise and more. The whole point of our first part of the dipshit meter is to how figure out how dangerous a person is. These famous or not so famous serial killers are. And we added basically public threat, which is a nicer way of saying body count. Because some of these people, the body count matters. In this case, 300 people, he's much larger threat than, say, even Jeffrey Dahmer with 17 or so.
Right.
And so we thought that would do justice to what we're trying to do here. And so we did that. We recalculated all of the scores for all of the 8 other people that we've looked into. And we've kind of graded them accordingly.
Their scores changed.
But it made more sense, too.
It did.
Because it took Joseph Fritzl, who was a 4.1, for example, who was higher than Ed Kemper and higher than Jeffrey Dahmer.
But killed no one. Right.
It brought him down to a 2.85. So one of the worst, one of the highest criminal minds, and one of the worst in, I think, depravity or fucking cruelty.
Yeah.
But then it made it more realistic because he didn't kill anyone.
Right.
He just tortured this poor girl and her family.
Yeah.
But it made everything right. And it put Pedro Lopez, he's second. He didn't quite take Albert Fish from...
I don't think anyone will ever take Albert Fish.
No. But with our new system, with the amount of people that are killed being part of this, Albert Fish dropped from a 4.9 to a 4.5. But Pedro Lopez, I think he was like the Hail Mary attempt to see if we could dethrone an Albert Fish.
Well, 300 people, even if they say more than that, but let's just say a round number of 300 people.
They found 57 in one spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 57, they found more than that.
Right, 57 identifiable.
But they found 57 identifiable bodies in one spot.
So he's got a bunch of those little things, like a bunch of little murder holes.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Well, so he didn't just kill. I mean, he kidnapped, he followed them around. He tracked their pathways and he stalked them,
so
basically.
This was pre-planned.
Very pre-planned. And then he kidnapped them, and then he drugged them away, and then he raped them repeatedly. Then he strangled them, and he admitted to this stuff. Now, when they inspected, they actually did. They can't autopsy bones,
Yeah, these are all decomposed bodies.
Yeah, but when they looked into it, there was no signs of like trauma or anything. At least not written down. They didn't document that.
Sure.
But so strangulation makes sense.
Right.
But who knows what he did to these girls?
Dear Jesus, you're seeing this, right?
Nobody knows.
But he said he would.
He said he strangled
them and let him come back. Not to the point of death, and then let him breathe.
Let him breathe.
Do it again.
So.
Dear Lord, you made some real shitty ones.
Even though his score is lower than Albert Fish, and he didn't do the terrible things Albert Fish did, the simple fact that he did this 300 plus times.
Yeah, I mean he's
one
of the
terrible.
most dangerous humans. He's in the.
Terrible.
Basically, he's a monster. He is a legit.
He is the monster of the Andes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's dig right into the Dipshit Files meter. Let's start with brutality. So for brutality, we gave him a 3.5. He didn't do the kind of bloody things that some of the other brutal people have done, but he raped children.
Yeah.
And hundreds of them. So 3.5. I know that sounds kind of low, but a 5 in this case is very gory.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
in the brutality, a 5 is, cutting the face off of somebody while they're still alive so you could wear it as a mask.
Right.
And he didn't do anything that we know of, and he never admitted to anything even remotely close to that.
Right.
It was strangulation and rape.
Yeah. So 3.5. Now let's check into cruelty. Cruelty, he gets a 4.75.
Yep.
He couldn't have been much more cruel.
Right.
With the way he did everything.
Yeah.
Why did you give him a 4.75?
The simple fact that he terrorized these children before he killed them. And there was women in there too, from what I understand in Peru, from the tribes. They said women. So I'm assuming they were adult females. But
right. It seemed his MO was very young.
The simple fact that they were raped every way possible. I mean, use your imagination.
Yeah,
Please don't think about that. But they were raped every way possible. They were strangled more than once. If they survived long enough. And so the cruelty, and he looked them all. He made a point to tell again and again that he looked all these children in the eyes as the life left them.
Seemed to be the main thing
on
for
purpose. Yeah, he wanted to see them leave.
Worst piece of shit.
Awful. Cruelty. High. Not as high as Fritzl. I mean, as Albert Fish, but
right,
cruelty
right
was
there.
high. Yeah.
Criminal Mind time.
Criminal Mind.
So his Criminal Mind, it wasn't super high, it wasn't super low. He was a 3.
Yeah, he was kind of middle of the road.
He stalked these girls. He
planned.
pre-planned. Yeah, and so he had an idea. He just dumped bodies. It seemed.
Well, at least he buried them. He
Right.
didn't just. Well, we think he buried them.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like he just kind of dug.
That's
a
not
hole
really a plan. That's just digging a hole.
Right.
And they buried them all right next to each other, so it made a big mud pudding of bones and sadness.
Oof. Yeah.
And that's how they found. Yeah. All right. Now let's check out his depravity.
Depravity.
So his depravity gets a 3.5. And he didn't do the things that say a Kroll would do or a Ed Kemper and these kind of things. But he's still pretty depraved because he's raping children.
Well, he never admitted to any type of necrophilia, but so I don't know if that were a thing.
Right. Do you agree with the 3.5?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Because it's so many people, and it's such
the sheer number just
crime.
drove it up. Yeah. And the people he chose.
Yeah.
Preteen girls.
Right.
Yikes.
I think probably all of you guys are like, no, it's 5 across the board. He's the worst that ever existed.
Yeah. Well,
If you think so, please let us know.
I'm trying to be as realistic and fair as possible.
Yes, that's what we're doing here. Yeah.
Right. I would give them all a 5 because they killed people.
Yeah.
But
But in this case, even though it's fucking atrocious, 3.5. And the last one is going to be public threat.
Threat to the public.
And so public threat, like we said, is our nice way of saying body count.
Yeah.
Is how much danger were people in the community in. And you said this before we recorded. It's like a percentage of the people, of the little girls in that village, he was going to knock off if people didn't get him out of there. That's about as dangerous as you could get.
Yep.
There's a high percentage in these villages.
Yeah, at one point he was killing 3 girls. He's, by his own claims, 3 girls a week.
Right. A village doesn't equate to a lot of people. That's hundreds or maybe 1,000 or something.
Right.
So that's, fuck. I mean, that's insane. That guy spends a weekend there and, a percentage of that, or a month there, and a percentage of that town is gone.
90 people gone.
That's insane. So he got the highest you could possibly get for public threat.
Right.
Because he's fucking Guinness Book.
I can't believe they did that.
I'm sure that somebody was like, "What the fuck?" in the company. They're like, "We never do that. That's terrible." But public threat 5.
Yeah.
And he's really this is the reason why we came up with this in the first place, to add this public threat, which I think makes 100% sense now. But yeah, you kill 300 people, you're more dangerous than Joseph Fritzl, who's just really good at torturing one person or a little group of his family.
Yeah.
So 5. And overall, that gives us a 3.95 for Mr. Pedro Lopez. And that puts him second on our list of dipshits that we've looked into so far. He's still ways below Albert Fish, who's a 4.5. But Pedro Lopez is higher than Joachim Kroll, who is a 3.85.
Yep.
Jeffrey Dahmer, who's a 3.55. Ed Kemper, who was a 3.35. Plus Joseph Fritzl, who became a 2.85, where he was a 4.1. They're like stats. But Amy Dugan was an interesting one in our new scale. She went from a 2.05, but she was such a prolific killer. All the way up to
63 people.
Yeah. So she went up. 63 is a 5 for us in the amount of public threat. So she got a 2.65. Making her a higher threat than Ed Gein, which I think is, and he actually dropped quite a bit down to a 2.0.
Yeah.
And then Eileen Warnos, she became a 1.4 from a much lower score. I think she was lower than that. So.
Yeah, well, she killed 7.
This is science, motherfuckers. We're sciencing this shit. Do you feel scienced? I hope you science that. We're scientists now. And so are you. You're a scientist now, too, for listening. Okay, maybe it doesn't work like that. All right, so overall, 3.95, and that's for the danger scale. And as you guys know, we have also the notoriety scale, and this kind of just gauges whether or not people were afraid during the time, whether that translated into more or less afraidness, fear at the end after the trial, and then the infamy that lived on or crossed borders and all that kind of stuff. So let's do the notoriety.
Dipshit notoriety.
All right, with notoriety, we have before he was caught. And the fear level was really high.
It was.
You gave him a 4.0.
That's because children were missing.
Right.
In droves.
And they thought it was, a cartel, or
at this time,
sex trafficking. Yeah,
it's realistic. At this time, that was happening. It's probably still happening.
It is, yeah.
Children were being abducted and for slave trade, for sex trade. So,
and he just put himself in there and hid amongst that.
Yeah, he was he was part of that abduction.
He may have doubled the numbers or something. Who knows? Well, probably not. It was, I'm sure, much more of a problem than that. But he became part of it. So you gave him a 4.
I gave him a 4 because the fear was high.
And so that leads us to after he was caught, people increased the amount of fear when they figured out that it was just one guy that killed hundreds of kids.
Oh, yeah.
So you gave him a 4.5.
Yeah. After it was discovered, they discovered the mass grave in that town. A lot of those children in that mass grave were from that town. The parents were still there. Their children had been missing. Flash flood came through. They discovered all these bones. Families were identifying their children and their brothers and their sisters. I know. So after he was discovered, they found out one man was doing all of this, their neighbor, or, some guy. And the fear was so high, everyone was afraid for their children.
Yeah.
So
this is a guy that wanted to be a teacher at one point. Fuck me.
Jeez.
All right. And then, so 4.5 in 1980 when it was discovered, he was doing this shit. And then they fucking let him out in 94.
I know.
The fuck are we doing? The 4.5 didn't last, that's for sure. We don't let 4.5s out.
No.
Guys, that's a human rule. We let 4.5s rot in jail or we kill them.
Insane. So, I guess he was declared criminally insane, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
and then, they healed him from his criminal insanity in 24 months.
Happens.
24 short months. You too can be healed from your criminal insanity.
That's right. You can kill 40 people and then we'll forgive you if you just listen to if you follow these 12 steps.
As long as Ecuador agrees to take you.
Right. Kicking the rock on down the road.
Hey.
And that leads us to infamy, which is the most surprising thing. I don't know what the answer is as to why this isn't a more famous name. The Monster of the Andes is... He's the scariest motherfucker. He's going after our children, our little girls. That's the boogeyman as far as that's a parent's boogeyman.
Yeah.
And yet we gave him a 1.5 because
nobody fucking knows his name.
Yeah, there's... who would make a movie about this? I wouldn't want to even attend a showing of such a film.
Well, unless you're surrounded by people who look into these types of stories on purpose. If you were to just bring up in conversation, be like, hey, did you hear about that? Yeah, like that one guy that killed 300 kids in South America. People would be like, who?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But in South America, still very popular, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
I don't know for a fact.
This is just Western.
This isn't shit that goes away. Yeah.
It's just here.
Yeah.
That his infamy is low because nobody really knows his name.
Yeah. And that's what the infamy scale is. Does it cross borders? Does it, I mean, Joachim Kroll didn't really cross borders, but we heard his name. But, Joseph Fritzl crossed some borders.
Absolutely.
And there's quite a few that I'm sure America, because we have, or the United States, we have so many media outlets that cover the shit and we're obsessed with it. I think all of our serial killers are just as famous as anyone else's around the world.
Well, Fritzl, let's keep in mind too, Fritzl happened very recently. It was 2008, I think.
Right.
And so that, or maybe it's 2012, but that just happened. So it was during the time of the internet and it was, it's during the time of technology.
Right.
This was pre all of that.
Sure.
Plus it was in South America.
Right.
Yeah, it was very rural, like rural areas. So smaller towns, smaller tribes, that sort of thing.
And I think, because of that, I think the statistic keeping...
It was,
it's just harder to trust.
Yeah.
When it's like, well, they weren't consistent here and there, so it's just a speculation. It's these big round numbers. Whenever you hear 100 people here, 50 people here, but then when you count 57 confirmed, and he's saying, I killed way more than that, and you find bones to 100, and that, you're like, well, fuck. Maybe this guy counted too low. Maybe it's 1,000 people. He doesn't know. 3 a week. How long did this guy live doing that?
Yep.
And he's still fucking out there. So overall, for his notoriety, with the three tiers, it was a 3.33, which isn't. It's just middle of the road. But it's mainly because of the terror that he caused in his local community. And
all over the freaking southern half of the continent.
Yeah, for sure.
One man.
All right, that's it for the dipshit meter. On the other side of this soundy thing will be our conclusions.
Dipshit Files conclusions.
All right, so our conclusions. I mean, is he the worst of all time? It's hard to say. 3.95 as far as the dipshit meter. He doesn't come up there with Albert Fish yet with 4.5. But
right. Well, he's up there. He's definitely up there.
Yeah.
He's definitely the most prolific serial killer that we are aware of at this time.
Yeah.
He definitely is. With the numbers, yeah.
And the monster of the Andes, that's a good, he is the boogeyman for parents.
Yeah.
He's the worst for parents that I've ever heard.
I don't like the fact that he's unknown where he's at. Yeah. He's out there somewhere.
That could be the worst part of all of this by far.
You know, he could have passed away, but there's no there's no record of his passing.
Yeah. Fuck that guy. Unmarked grave.
Right.
Once we do know he's dead, then it's like, yeah, we'll throw him in the bog. The fucking alligators eat him or whatever. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to our show. This has been the Dipshit Files, episode number 5. This has been a dark one. It was not.
Yeah.
Without going into detail, it ended up being painting dark-ass pictures in my head.
Yeah, well, I tried to get rid of as much darkness as I could without tainting the story.
It's just human beings and what some of them, very few of them are capable of, and what the wiring of the brain can do, and what some of that nurture can do, perhaps, too.
Right.
You know, he had a terrible life, and he had a terrible fucking brain. Well, thank you guys. If you guys want to support what we do, you can always check us out on Patreon, /SkatCast. I think it's /. Maybe it's a forward slash. /SkatCast. You can always check out our website, SkatCast.com. You guys know how to support podcasts. I've seen it with my own eyes many a time. So if you guys like what we do, you know how to do it. Next week, we are going to visit another lady serial killer.
Yes, we are.
And just her name is so fucking crazy for being a serial killer. Linda Hazard.
Yes.
Just a dirty bitch. Killing lots of them boys.
Yeah.
Probably with some poison and fucking
no
choking
poison.
and stabbed a guy in his face. Nothing of that?
No.
I was wrong as fuck. I was trying too hard.
Dumb.
Right.
We're going to discuss that. It's a very interesting story.
That song is going to play the whole episode, though. I'm bringing that back the whole time, just so you guys know. All right, so tell us a little bit about Linda Hazard.
Well, Linda Hazard is a doctor.
Oh.
But she's not.
No. She was a fake doctor? Was she
She was a pretend naturopath type doctor.
Oh, shit, boss.
Yeah, located right here in Washington State.
Oh, God.
Occurred in Olalla, over by the Sound.
West Side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Okay.
And the reason...
How many people did she end up?
It's not exactly known. But 2 for sure broke the story. So I'll have all those
2,
details.
They couldn't be dead.
2 people broke the story.
Living people.
1 died.
Oh, Jesus.
And the other one didn't. She almost died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they're the ones that brought the story to the public eye. And they're from the UK.
Okay.
And this was set in the early 1914, 1910, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we look forward to that terrible story, I'm sure.
It's a very, very interesting story, and it fucking blows my mind that this woman got away with what she got away with. It's another one of those where it's like, what?
People are just keeping their heads down. Keep your head down. Just keep your head down. Get through the weekend. You'll be fine.
And it's interesting because it pulls the AMA in there, American Medical Association. It pulls in the funeral community, the funeral business, funerary business. Anyways, pulls that into it. Lawyers and, lots of vomit.
Well, if there's flies, lawyers are around where the flies are.
Vomit and body fluids. So, Yay.
So looking forward to that next week.
A mistaken body.
Ugh.
Family comes in to see the embalmed body, and they're like, that's not my daughter.
Yikes.
Yeah, crazy. It's a crazy story. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yay, more tragedy. Sounds good to me. Well, all right, you guys. This has been Dipshit Files number 5. I've been Mr. Script Keeper.
And I've been Mrs. Script Keeper.
And we'll talk at you in the future. It'll seem like the present.
Bye.
Dipshit Files.
Bing bong, bing.